Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. A new study shows children born during the pandemic are developing motor and social skills at a slower rate than those born before it due to a lack of interaction.
There's a lot of grief as a parent when you've spent 10 months creating this human and there's no one to share them with.
Experts say it's hard to tell if isolation at such an early stage will lead to long-term issues. Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Bloomington was recently designated a historic district, preserving the property in perpetuity.
A lot of buildings that should not have been torn down, that meant a lot to African Americans, are gone.
And the Zero in Bloomington initiative is a website where residents can register and track their actions in becoming carbon neutral. We'll have these stories plus the latest news from across the state right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Hoosiers have until Tuesday to register or update their registration if they want to vote in the November election. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports on what you'll need so you can cast a ballot this fall.
The voter registration deadline is October 11th. If you want to register or update your registration in person at your local election administrator's office, you have until the close of business that day. But you have until midnight if you visit indianavoters.com. There you can register or update your registration, see who's on your ballot, find your polling place, and request an absentee mail-in ballot. To register, you'll need either an Indiana driver's license or state identification card, and you must be a citizen and have lived in your current precinct at least 30 days before the election. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
We are now joined by Karen Wheeler, the Monroe County Election Supervisor, for more on the upcoming election. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, anything new this election cycle that people should know about?
Well, one thing that's on our ballot that hasn't been there for a number of years is the referendum. So the school board, the MCCSC school, has a referendum, and that is available for everyone who is in that district. So it's a little bit longer to read, and there's more information on that. They don't want to forget to be able to vote yes or no on that one.
Let's just talk a little bit about election security, a major topic after the last election. What do you tell people who ask or are concerned about the machines used?
The good thing in Monroe County is that it is all paper ballots, and so we don't vote on electronic machines. And I do believe that paper ballots are more secure, and that's why Monroe County does what they do. However, saying that, the security on the machines, I believe, are very high. I'm not as much of an expert on that because we are that paper ballot county, and it takes more work, it's more effort, it costs more money to do a paper ballot, but because of it being safer and just all around a better system, that's what we do.
So early voting starts next week. What kind of turnout are you expecting this year?
If I compare to our last equivalent midterm in 2018, I am expecting about 21,000 to have walk-in voters. And so we're prepared for that. We're ready to go. In fact, I have training that's going on at this very moment. I had training yesterday and actually the day before and today. And so my staff is ready to go and we're ready to meet those voters.
Did you see any increase in registration since Roe was overturned this summer, or just, I guess, any increase in registration in general, with the country now that just seems so polarized?
You would think so, but in general, it's been pretty steady and pretty typical. We've been getting them in, of course, daily for registration. And speaking of registration, that does close next week. So October 11th is the last day for early voting, for registering for early voting, or Election Day, of course. But, and you can register up till midnight on the 11th. If you go online, I wouldn't suggest that. It cuts off at 11:59, but I would bring in, if you have a paper copy, bring it into the office or mail it. Mailing, it's kind of little tricky right now because we have to have it by Tuesday, by the close of the day at 4 o'clock, if you're bringing it or mailing it in.
So lastly, before we go, why should people vote? What's the message?
Oh, it's so important to be out there and vote. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, you need to get your voice out there. And the best way to do that is, of course, to vote. It's a privilege, but I also like to think of it as a right, that it's your responsibility, actually. So please come out and vote, and we will be there. We'll help you through it. If you're nervous about it and you've never voted before, that's okay. Our people are trained, and we love to help people vote in everything that we do.
Karen, thank you so much for being on the show, and good luck.
Thank you very much. You have a great day.
All right, you too. Well, with Indiana's general election roughly 1 month away, some polling shows Democratic U.S. Senate candidate Tom McDermott in a tight race against incumbent Republican Senator Todd Young. But according to the group Open Secrets, which tracks money in politics, Young has raised over 20 times what McDermott has in political donations. Indiana Democratic Party Chairman Mike Schmuhl says the state party is having conversations with national Democrats about bringing more funding to McDermott's race.
Those conversations, just to be completely blunt, they're ongoing, and I hope to have more and more of them in the days and weeks ahead.
Overall, Open Secrets found that Republicans have raised nearly $24 million so far this cycle. Democrats have raised just over $12 million. A preliminary study says children born during the pandemic are developing motor and social skills more slowly than children born before the pandemic, regardless if they contracted COVID or not. As Benta Boutier reports, child experts say developmental concerns are adding to an already stressed parent.
On the east side of Bloomington, Molly McDonald unfurls yoga mats and shows what a child development class with new and expecting parents looks like. Previously a research specialist in developmental psychology, she teaches courses that help parents interact with their infants. She says early days of parenthood are isolating under normal circumstances. Tacking on stress of navigating COVID-19 guidelines and access to healthcare could have had detrimental effects for parents and infants.
In most cases, they're going into a hospital that is filled with people who are ill with COVID-19. The scariest place to be is where they have to bring their baby into the world. So there were unbearable amounts of pressure on new parents.
She hopes the cocoon helps new parents access a community and decrease stress. Anna Branham had 2 children during the pandemic, one in 2019 and one in 2022. She attends and now teaches classes at the cocoon. She's worried about her children's safety and connection to the community.
I'm okay if they're known with a speech impediment or if it takes them 6 months longer to catch up developmentally, but I do want them to be healthy and to be known.
Because of the pandemic, Branham's children haven't had as much interaction with their grandparents or extended family as she wants.
We spent so much time in isolation where we couldn't see friends, we couldn't see family, and there's a lot of grief as a parent when you've spent 10 months creating this human and there's no one to share them with.
Because infants weren't meeting as many people, Professor of Early Childhood at IU, Mary Benson McMullen, says seeing some delays in development during COVID makes sense. She added facial expression is key for infants to pick up on emotional cues, and masks could have been an inhibitor. But she also says it's hard to tell how much effect a delay at 6 months will have long term. The Columbia study reporting delays in development used feedback reports provided by mothers, which McMullen says might say more about the stress and anxiety new parents are facing. The National Library of Medicine reports increased symptoms of stress and anxiety among new parents since 2019.
So if your sense of security and safety is shaken, or you're preoccupied by that in terms of your mental capacity and your emotional capacity, your ability to care fully for your child or yourself might be impacted.
She says if parents are isolated and anxious about their parenting, they might be more likely to perceive their child's behavior as different or delayed. Her concern was a limitation mentioned in the study.
As they look at the benchmark tables of what your child should do at a certain time, not to become too concerned about their child missing a benchmark, missing a milestone.
Branham says attending and starting to teach classes at the Cocoon has helped her work through what she went through as a parent during the pandemic.
I love holding space for women who are postpartum and letting them know that they're seen and that their baby is seen, since it's something that I didn't get.
She says parents might be grieving right now, whether that be through worry about their children's development or their baby missing out on moments of in-person love and normalcy. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ben Taboutier.
McDonald says if people can access the Cocoon in person, she runs the 3 Journeys online community for parents. And now for headlines, look who's here. It's Holden Absher. Hi, Holden.
Hi, Joe. Members of 2 homeless camps in Bloomington were forced to move off private property this week. One camp was off Patterson Drive, about a quarter-mile northwest of Catalent, and the other was behind the Westside Fresh Time. Travis Cummings is from Bloomington and says he lived in the Patterson camp of 6 people for 2 years. Cummings told us, quote, "They came last week and put the notice up, and it's only been 6 days, and at 9 a.m. there was no ifs, ands, or buts. You were going to jail if you didn't leave." Members of the other encampment behind Fresh Time were told that they had to evacuate the area Tuesday evening.
It's very unfortunate that it happens at all. And really, there's not much we can do but shut it down and clean it up, which generally means they just go someplace else.
The campsite behind Fresh Time was on a revocable land trust, which is private property, and campers were told that the owner would bulldoze the area whether or not there were still personal belongings. Hundreds of students gathered for a vigil on the campus of Purdue University Wednesday night, less than 24 hours after a student was found dead on campus. Police are currently investigating the death of 20-year-old Varun Manish Chedda as a homicide. His roommate, 22-year-old Jin Min Shah, an international student from South Korea, is in custody on a charge of murder. The Tippecanoe County Coroner's Office said Chedda died from multiple sharp force traumatic injuries. The IU School of Medicine will receive $48.8 million from the National Institute on Aging to continue research into treatments for Alzheimer's disease. The grant is using a framework for Alzheimer's research that the Institute established in 2016. Researchers hope that tests on animal models will resemble Alzheimer's disease in humans.
Phenotype those models, so examine how closely they resemble to human Alzheimer's disease. And then those that are most promising, we actually then have a program, a preclinical testing core that actually then tests new therapeutics, that are nominated by the scientific community.
This is the second renewal of the partnership between IU School of Medicine and the NIA, the largest branch of Alzheimer's disease research within the National Institute of Health. Bloomington city leaders are starting a new program that tracks the city's progress toward reducing greenhouse gas emissions and are asking residents to sign up. Joe Wren has this report.
The Zero in Bloomington initiative is a website where residents can register and track their actions in becoming carbon neutral.
Climate change does not get resolved by individual actions alone like this. Systemic and infrastructure overall changes are important.
It also provides residents with resources to combat climate change and ways to reduce emissions. The goal is to reach net zero by 2050. The 2020 City Climate Survey indicated more than 80% of Bloomington residents are concerned about increasing climate change. Users can track anything from solar panel installations to walking instead of driving.
And you can compete against other teams in the community or against other households with your team, et cetera. And so on the site, we'll be able to see like top teams, top individuals, top households.
Besides action tips and local resources, rebates, tax credits, and programs are provided. The city hopes to achieve 100 tons of carbon emissions reduction by December 2023. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Joe Wren.
The city of Bloomington hopes to achieve 100 tons of carbon emission reduction by December 2023. Columbus City Council members are raising the city's state status from Class 3 to Class 2. An ordinance was adopted a month ago after being put off for about a decade. Mayor Jim Linnop says that the population of Columbus is around 50,000, and it finally made sense to move forward with the change of class. The city will go from 7 council members to 9.
It's a little bit more involved, and we just want to make sure we get it right because there's a whole lot of focus right now on elections and election integrity.
The city will also change from having a split clerk-treasurer position to a full-time clerk and a new controller. Farmers and analysts say that so far this year's harvest appears average throughout the state. Last year, the state averaged 195 bushels per acre, the best harvest Indiana had ever seen. This year, the USDA estimates Indiana will harvest 186 bushels per acre, putting harvest on pace for an average year.
It's kind of full bore across the state in terms of harvest right now. And the weather, the way the weather is right now, really helps the farmers to be able to get in those fields and get things done.
About 14% of all crops in Indiana have been harvested so far, and harvest season can range from early September all the way to late November, depending on weather. And that's all we have for headlines this week. Joe, back to you.
All right, thanks, Holden. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk.
The 150-year-old Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church has been designated a historic district in Bloomington. And it's leaf peeper season, and there may be no better place in the Midwest to see fall foliage than the Hoosier National Forest.
These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Public television's mission is to create a more informed and engaged public with inspiring programs, compelling stories, and trustworthy news. And we can't do it without a team of professional journalists, media specialists, engineers, and administrators making it happen both on the air and behind the scenes. Want to work for WTIU? Find the latest job postings on our website. Details at WTIU.org/jobs.
Life is full of choices, and right now your favorite member benefit, Passport, is offering more choices for you to stream.
Welcome to the club.
It's a beautiful thing. With cooking.
Gotta let it cook, but I keep wanting to smell it.
Travel.
And here we are.
Oh, yeah!
Documentaries.
I realized I could change the world.
And so much more. The choice is yours with Passport on the PBS Video app.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Well, last year, an Indiana law took away protections for isolated wetlands that aren't directly connected to a body of water and make up most of the wetlands in the state. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel has this story on the final report by a task force created to study wetland protections in Indiana.
The task force says the state should give more funding to environmental agencies, provide tax incentives for developers who avoid building on wetlands, and protect isolated wetlands under state law, instead of relying on federal protections alone. Task Force Chair Will Ditzler says at some point, Indiana will have to start making the environment a priority. Right now, we're lagging behind neighboring states.
So it just really comes down to prioritization. Do we want to live in a state that has good water quality and has wetlands for wildlife and has less flooding or not?
The report also recommends allowing home builders to increase housing density, which would mean more homes on smaller lots of land.
Less linear feet of sewer pipe or water pipe that we have to run, less
roads, sidewalks that we have to build and ultimately pass on to the customers.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
Bethel AME has been in Bloomington since 1870, and its longtime church was granted historic status in August. Now, other properties with ties to the Black community could follow suit. Holden Absher has this report.
R. Miller Grubb knows to ask somebody before throwing something away. It's a lesson she learned in the 70s as a newer member in Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. She was cleaning when her and another member came across a cup in the pastor's lectern.
And we found this dirty, nasty, ugly thing with stuff stuffed in it. And we said, what are we going to do with this? And we said, well, we ought to throw it away.
A part-time preacher told Grubb the cup was worth keeping. It turns out it belonged to Maddie Jacobs Fuller, who collected $13,000 in it during the early 1920s to help build the current Bethel AME. She sat the cup next to a small organ as she sang and played gospel music on the courthouse square. Fuller was born into slavery in Kentucky and moved after the Civil War. She trained as a hairdresser, eventually becoming the richest Black woman in Bloomington. Meanwhile, just up the road in Indianapolis, hairdresser Madam C.J. Walker became the first self-made Black female millionaire.
Indianapolis has not forgotten about Madam Walker. Bloomington has forgotten about Maddie Jacobs Fuller.
Mitchell says she wants Bloomington to commemorate Fuller in some way.
She kind of had a one-up over on Madam C.J. Walker. So she could do hair, she could play the organ, and she could sing.
When the current church was complete in 1922, a lot of members worked for the university. And still today, IU employees play an important role in the 55-person congregation.
A lot of the faculty and staff, have become members over the years, and then they bring in their colleagues and so forth, and then, of course, the students, the many students.
Currently, no IU students attend the church, but it's looking to recruit younger members now that services are in person.
My hope is that it continues to just grow by leaps and bounds, honestly, and that our membership can gain like it once was, where we used to have to go pull out extra chairs.
The church's path to historic status began when Elizabeth Mitchell, who also sits on the city's Historic Preservation Commission, realized it didn't have any protection from future development. She contacted members and helped them petition the property to the city.
I come from Indianapolis. I know about Indiana Avenue. And a lot of buildings that should not have been torn down, that meant a lot to African Americans, are gone. Apartments or retail stores. I didn't want to see that happen to Bethel.
Mitchell says there are other properties on the near west side she wants to see protected soon, including the B.G. Pollard Lodge, which is known as the Hole. The former Elks Lodge on West 7th Street was a popular hangout for Black residents and students.
They came over here to have a place where you could breathe, where you could be yourself, where you could be with people like you that weren't trying to fill your skin or touch your hair.
She says it's important for everybody, especially younger people that are not from Bloomington, to learn about all aspects of the city's shared history.
And not just one version, not just one story, because then people get lost and they're forgotten forever.
One way to remember stories is by saving and protecting property. Property you should ask somebody about before throwing it away. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Holden Absher.
Bloomington was ranked the #1 city in the Midwest to view fall foliage by RocketHomes.com, thanks mainly to the Hoosier National Forest. Callie Lichter has this report.
Bloomington is known for its beautiful campus and fall foliage colors, but its main fall attraction, Hoosier National Forest. Marianne Mason is the public affairs specialist at Hoosier National Forest. She says 2 main reasons make the fall so enjoyable.
Number 1, the weather's typically cooler, so it's nice to be out. And 2, you get to see the beauty of our hardwood trees, our native hardwood species that are constantly changing throughout the fall.
The forest attracts leaf peepers, people who enjoy going out in the fall to watch as nature changes colors. Different trees in the area will change color at different times. Mason says maples are the first to turn and they tend to be the brightest, but it all depends on the local weather.
We expect, based on the warm days and cool temperatures that we've been experiencing, if that continues, that this year we'll have an average to above average intensity for leaf color.
Last year was on the warmer side, which Mason says contributed to diminished leaf colors. Due to the popularity of the forest, Mason says locations like the Fire Tower and the Charles C. Dean Wilderness can get crowded.
If you're planning to go to those areas, we would recommend that you come during our non-peak times, so maybe during a weekday when it's less busy, or earlier in the morning on a weekend.
In addition to the changing leaves, the forest also has changing fall wildflowers and fall fruits such as persimmons. Forest silviculturists say Bloomington's fall foliage peak will come around Halloween if this weather pattern continues.
Different trees have different colors and will change at different times. So no matter when you come in the fall, there's always something great to see.
Leaf peepers curious about the science of fall leaf color can visit the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Forest Service page on the Science of Fall Colors. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Callie Lichter.
That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.